It's Colorado 1885. Certain folks step into a town as if they fit in. Eliza Marsh wasn't among those. There she sat on the front steps of the Clearfield Hotel one Tuesday in October, a lone leather bag by her side. Her face bore the look of a person who's exhausted all choices, but isn't quite willing to acknowledge it. Her hair was slipping free from its pins. Her travel-worn dress, linen beige, had known far better days and weeks. She traveled from Tennessee to reunite with her uncle, her last remaining relative. He'd sent her a letter back in January. "Head west," he wrote. "There is space out here, a life truly worth constructing." She stuffed all her belongings into that leather bag, sold everything else, and caught a train westward. Her uncle had passed away 2 weeks before her arrival, pneumonia, swift and final. All he left was an unfiled land claim and a minor debt at the general store. She had no place to return to. Nothing to return to. So she remained on the hotel steps in Clearfield, Colorado, calculating a life that had no more numbers left. Just then, a boy around 9 years old halted in front of her. He stared at her with the unflinching eyes of a child who hasn't yet been taught that staring is rude, standing right before her. Then he remarked, "Staring's not polite," and asked, "Why are you sad?" Before she could reply, a man's voice called out, "Owen." She lifted her gaze. The man was tall. He had dark hair tinged with gray at the temples, a dark waistcoat over a linen shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He had the appearance of someone accustomed to outdoor work, no longer aware of it. In his hands, he carried a list and a package, presumably from the general store. He shot Owen a look that had clearly been etched into both of them over time, likely the same look for 3 years straight. "Owen," he repeated. "She looks sad, Papa," the boy said without budging. "People have every right to be sad," the man replied. "It's none of our concern." "But we could choose to make it our concern," Owen countered. The younger girl, with dark braid, observed everything silently. She had come to a stop, and she watched Eliza with the focused gaze of a person who absorbs more than she reveals. In turn, Eliza looked back at the three of them. "I'm fine," she said, a lie, but the easiest response to offer. The man studied her like a rancher reads the sky, assessing what truly is, not what he wishes to see. "Daniel Holt," he introduced himself, transferring the package to his left hand and reaching out his right. "This is Owen. That's Lucy." "Eliza Marsh," she replied, shaking his hand. "You're not from Clearfield," he observed. "Tennessee," she answered. "I came looking for my uncle." A subtle change crossed his expression. It wasn't pity, but something softer. The acknowledgement of a man who understands what it feels like to find something missing from where it ought to be. "Did you find him?" he asked. She glanced at the street. She said, "He passed away before I got there." Owen had ceased his restless movements, and Lucy had inched a bit nearer to her father's side. Daniel Holt offered his apologies, and his sincerity was clear. She could sense the depth of his regret. There's a distinction between sympathy from someone who has experienced genuine loss and sympathy from someone who hasn't. He asked, "Do you have a place to stay?" "Why?" Glancing back at the hotel and then at him, she replied, "I'm figuring that out." With only $4.30 to her name and a nightly hotel rate of $2, she could afford 2 nights. That meant she had a 2-day window to secure employment, not entirely unfeasible. Yet it was so near impossible that the difference seemed theoretical. She hadn't shared any of this with Daniel Holt. She utilized the afternoon as best she could. The general store wasn't hiring, the restaurant had complete staff, and the school already had an instructor. The laundromat on the outskirts presented a potential opportunity. Its owner, a Mrs. Pierce, mentioned that work might be available next week, but not this one. She studied Eliza's hands the way someone evaluates whether a woman has experience with laundry. Eliza had indeed done laundry. She had experience with nearly everything. Since age 14, she had managed her family's household. Following her mother's death, she took on cooking, sewing repairs, and bookkeeping. The never-ending mundane running of a life, with no one ever inquiring if she wished to be the one in charge. She returned to her room to recalculate the numbers. Upon hearing a knock, she opened the door to find Owen Holt in the corridor. Clutching a covered dish, he said, "Dad made stew. You probably haven't eaten yet." Standing in the hallway behind the boy, at a deliberate distance that indicated he had sent his son forward instead of knocking directly, Daniel Holt stared at the wall. She said, "He didn't need to go to that trouble." Owen replied, "I know. He does things he doesn't have to. Lucy says it's because Mom isn't around now, and he's unsure what to do with the surplus." He said this with the gravity of a 9-year-old who deems this crucial information. At the far end of the corridor, Daniel Holt shut his eyes for a moment. Eliza accepted the dish. And I must say, Owen's remark struck me. No child of 9 should have to bear such acute understanding of his father's sorrow. Yet he did. And he offered it to an unfamiliar woman standing at a hotel door, as if it were perfectly ordinary. She remained for a second and third night after Mrs. Pierce sent a message that she could begin at the laundry on Thursday. This meant Eliza had to be in Clearfield by that day, which demanded funds she hadn't fully secured yet. On Wednesday morning, she went downstairs, and the hotel clerk informed her that an additional 3 nights had been covered. She located Daniel at the feed store. "That wasn't necessary," she told him. "I'm aware," he replied, continuing to load sacks without pausing his work. "I'm going to repay you," she stated. "There's no need," he answered. "Regardless, I will," she insisted. Pausing his loading, he gazed straight at her, not appraising her this time, merely observing. "Very well," he conceded, "you'll do so." It wasn't a rejection. This was the recognition of a man who knew that taking assistance and taking charity were not the same, and who honored that distinction without highlighting it. From Thursday to Saturday, she labored at the laundry. The work was strenuous and hot, and she excelled at it. On Saturday, Mrs. Pierce informed her that she could return the following week, not a resolution, but a path forward. That same afternoon, Daniel arrived at the laundry with Owen and Lucy, claiming he was just passing by. It wasn't en route to any destination he had previously named. While his father spoke with Mrs. Pierce, Owen mentioned that at breakfast, Lucy had inquired whether the woman from Tennessee would be staying. Eliza asked what his father had replied. Owen considered the question, then said he didn't know, though he added that his father had sounded as if he was hoping she would stay. He returned to observing the street with the calm of a child who has completed his task. Lucy addressed her directly for the first time on a Sunday. Daniel had taken the children to church, while Eliza arrived by herself and spotted them 2 rows in front. After the service, Daniel presented her to Reverend Cole and various townsfolk with the casualness of someone who had made up his mind without declaring it. All 4 of them strolled back along the main street in that manner, which occurs when no one has arranged it, yet everyone has embraced it. Lucy walked at her side. She remained silent for an extended period. Then she asked, "Do you know how to braid hair?" "Yes," Eliza replied. Lucy explained, "Papa tries. He practices on the horse's tail, but it's just not the same." Eliza glanced at Daniel, who was walking in front with Owen, either not catching this or pretending otherwise with remarkable dedication. "I could teach you," Eliza offered. "Yes," Lucy agreed with the serene confidence of a 6-year-old certain of her desires. That afternoon, Eliza settled on the hotel porch, braiding Lucy's hair as Owen delivered an exhaustive account of every horse on his father's ranch. Daniel occupied the 3rd chair. Speaking very little, she had come to realize this wasn't disengagement but focused presence, and he absorbed everything. When the moment came to depart, Lucy grasped her hand for a moment before releasing it. Daniel's gaze moved from his daughter's braid to Eliza. He remained silent, yet as they walked toward their wagon, Owen declared loudly, "Papa, can she join us for supper?" In that tone, father's reserved for when a child has spoken an honest truth at an awkward time, Daniel said, "Owen." Eliza gazed at the mountains, saying nothing. She experienced something she hadn't felt for ages, the feeling that she might be exactly where she belonged. I want to pause here for a moment. This narrative has traveled to locations I never dreamed of. Audiences in Nigeria, India, the Philippines, Mexico, South Africa, and various nations I wouldn't have been able to list. When I initially began writing a Western tale, each and every one of you discovered something in these characters that was worth hearing, and that holds immense value to me. If this tale is brightening your night, a light carries more significance than you realize. Let me pause briefly here. This narrative has found audiences in locations I never dreamed of. Listeners in Brazil, Nigeria, India, the Philippines, Mexico, South Africa, and nations I wouldn't have known to name. Originally, when I began sharing a Western tale, Each and every one of you discovered something in these characters that you valued listening to, and that holds immense meaning for me. If this tale is providing you with a pleasant night, a thumbs up has more significance than you realize. Owen extended the invitation, though not in an official capacity. Following the Sunday walk, Owen was instructed not to extend a supper invitation to Eliza without prior permission. He technically adhered to this rule by requesting his father's consent on Monday morning, to which Daniel responded, "We'll see." Owen took that as a yes. On Wednesday evening, Eliza arrived at the Holt ranch. She discovered the table was set for four, and Lucy was arranging wildflowers in a jar with the intense focus of someone carrying out a scheme. "Owen mentioned you were coming," Lucy stated. "Owen told me the same thing," Eliza said from the kitchen. "I apologize for this." "Don't," she replied, and she was sincere. The ranch house was constructed by someone with expertise, sturdy, well-crafted, everything orderly. However, it was the type of home that had been operated for 2 years by a solitary man, rendering it practical but somewhat lacking in warmth. It resembled locations that have lost the memory of being cared for beyond the bare essentials. The meal was quite good. Daniel prepared the meal skillfully without any fuss, not highlighting his proficiency. Owen did all the talking. Lucy observed Eliza with unwavering focus, a level of attention she had evidently chosen to bestow. Daniel offered balanced remarks at suitable intervals. Post-meal, the kids were sent off to bed with a decisiveness implying he had words to share. Seated across from her at the kitchen table with his coffee, he stated, "I want to ask you a straightforward question, because I don't know any alternative approach." She remained silent. "How long do you intend to remain in Clearfield?" She glanced at her cup. "I'm uncertain," she admitted truthfully. "I have no other obligations." He gave a single nod, slowly processing something. "That response isn't a poor one," he remarked, which caught her off guard. "Why?" she inquired. He gazed at his coffee. "Because I've got a query I'm not prepared to pose yet," he said, "and I require you to remain present when I am." He invited her to the ranch on the upcoming Saturday, not for a meal. He was precise, and he intended to show her something. He spoke with the demeanor of someone who has practiced his intended words. And he isn't completely confident it will withstand the real moment. On Saturday, she arrived, and he showed her the property, the northern pasture, the fencing, the barn. The vegetable garden had become overgrown because he couldn't handle everything, and the livestock took priority. He pointed out the apple tree to the east that his wife had planted during the first year. He displayed everything to her without any commentary, as if the act of displaying was its own justification. After that, they settled on the porch. Owen and Lucy could be seen in the yard, occupied with a rope-related task that seemed quite significant. Daniel rotated his coffee cup in his hands. He began, "I have something to tell you, and I need you to understand that your refusal is completely acceptable to me." He added, "And our relationship will stay the same." She remained silent. He continued, "I require assistance running this ranch, not only with the chores, although those are also needed. I need a person who can transform a house into a home, someone whose guidance Owen will accept, and from whom Lucy can gain knowledge." He gazed at the mountains. "I need someone who can truly be present here on a permanent basis." She remained completely motionless. "I'm not referring to an employee," he clarified. "I'm referring to something genuine, something lasting." He met her gaze directly. "I'm proposing that we become a family." The Colorado afternoon enveloped the two of them. He acknowledged, "I realize you don't have enough familiarity with me to reply at this moment. I'm not seeking your decision today." He explained, "I'm sharing my thoughts because you have been truthful with me from the very beginning, and I felt it was appropriate to be equally truthful with you." She regarded this man cautious, straightforward, and entirely honorable. He had dispatched his son carrying stew and settled a hotel bill without any prior notice. He had revealed a lifeless vegetable patch to her, as though it were an admission of guilt. She responded, "Daniel, I will consider it." He replied, "That's the only thing I'm requesting," and he was completely sincere in every statement. The problem appeared on Monday morning. He went by Ned Hargrove, age 40, proprietor of the feed supply business at the southern edge of Clearfield. He had recently lost his wife and made no secret of it. He showed up at the laundromat while Eliza was on duty. He possessed the casual self-assurance of someone repeatedly assured by others that he is a desirable match. He had begun to accept this notion without any proof. He was amiable and successful, and he invited her to accompany him to the Henderson. It was a Friday social event, delivered with the polished charisma of a man who had executed this approach previously and anticipated it would succeed. She expressed gratitude and told him she would ponder his offer. Mrs. Pierce, who had been ironing shirts 3 feet distant, remained silent until his departure. She uttered Ned Hargrove, followed by, Eliza reported. Mrs. Pierce commented, a fine man, dependable, highly respected. His deceased wife was a friend of mine. She hesitated momentarily. He would look after you. Eliza continued her work. The entire community believes Daniel Holt is too set in his habits to remarry. Mrs. Pierce spoke with the frankness of a woman who values tact. They believe, due to inefficiency, that he will manage that ranch by himself until the kids are older. Glancing at Eliza across the shirts, she said, I'm not claiming they're correct. I'm just stating what people believe. Eliza spent the entire afternoon considering Ned Hargrove steady, agreeable, and someone who would look after her. She pondered what it meant to be cared for by a man she selected precisely for those qualities. She then reflected on choosing someone for a more particular reason. A lifeless vegetable patch gleamed as if it were a confession. A coffee cup was rotated in cautious hands. A young boy delivered stew to a hotel room. She recalled the words she said to herself during her first week in the hotel. She feared desiring this too intensely, of agreeing to the wrong option simply because it was there. Ned Hargrove was an available choice. He represented the secure answer to her dilemma. Standing at the ironing board as Tuesday's light filtered through the window, she realized that safety and correctness weren't synonymous. She had erred on a minor scale before and refused to repeat that mistake. She mulled over Daniel's offer for another week. Not the logistical aspect that was obvious from day one. One choice, the laundry work, a hotel room, $4.30, arriving alone in Clearfield with nobody to greet her. The alternative, a ranch, a home, 2 children who had already made up their minds. He revealed a withered garden, like other men reveal their emotions. The tough inquiry was if she was accepting Daniel Holt or simply accepting the end of her solitude. She questioned if a distinction existed and if it was significant. She had experienced loneliness for a long period, though not always in a physical sense. But her loneliness was that of a person who constantly supports others but is never supported herself. She feared that desire would lead her to accept something imperfect and convince herself it was sufficient. Thursday, she visited the ranch to return a book. Lucy was on the veranda, trying to repair a piece of fabric with focus beyond her ability. Lucy looked up. Will you stay? She asked. I'm considering it, Eliza replied. Owen believes you will, Lucy said. He says that Papa seems changed when you're around. Different in what way? Eliza asked. Lucy pondered that with her usual gravity. Not as if he's carrying everything alone, she answered. She resumed her mending, and Eliza settled on the porch step, gazing at the mountains. She realized with the calm assurance that comes when a child utters a truth unintentionally. The question she had been weighing all week was incorrect. The correct query was more straightforward. Did she wish to shoulder responsibilities alongside someone rather than by herself? The response had been affirmative for quite some time. She had simply been scared to voice it because speaking it aloud would make it tangible, and tangible things can be taken away. She encountered Daniel by the north fence on Friday morning, not having intended to seek him out. Her plan was to head to the laundry, but after walking 3 blocks, she paused and reversed her direction because she possessed the answer. Keeping it to herself for another day seemed pointless, and neither of them had time to spare. He spotted her approaching through the field. He ceased his labor and waited with the patience of someone who has resolved to not jump to conclusions. She halted a short distance from the fence. I've been reflecting on what you mentioned, she told him. I understand, he replied. I want to agree, she said. But there's something I need to share first. He remained silent. I'm not choosing this because I lack other options. She continued, I have the laundry. I received another proposal. Just this week, from a man that everyone in town sees as a sensible match, she said, meeting his gaze. I'm agreeing because Owen talked about horses for 40 minutes, and because Lucy asked me to braid her hair, and because you pointed out a dead vegetable patch as if it were the most significant feature of the land." She paused. "I'm saying yes because of you, not because of the other option." He gazed at her for a lengthy moment. "Then I need to reveal something to you." She stood silently. "When I saw you on the hotel steps," he said, "Owen asked why you were upset, and I told him it wasn't our concern. I walked off convinced of that. I reached the end of the block and halted because I couldn't stop reflecting on the day I first met my wife, and how I nearly stayed silent, and how entirely different things would have turned out." He glanced at the fence post. "I spun around, went back, and Owen had already begun speaking with you." A near smile appeared. "From that moment, he's been attempting to provide me another opportunity." She observed this man, his fence post, his gray sideburns, and his son who delivered stew to strangers. "Yes," she said simply, fully. "Yes, they wed in December at the Clearfield church. Owen was the happiest person present and didn't try to hide it." Lucy wore the ribbon that Eliza had woven into her braid and stood up straight. She possessed the seriousness of someone taking part in an event she had long prepared for. Daniel stood by the altar, watching Eliza approach. He recalled a Tuesday afternoon, a woman on hotel steps, a boy who posed the wrong question at precisely the perfect moment. The hands-on work started in January. He had to learn the ranch, the fence lines, cattle habits, which grazing fields survived drought and which didn't. He also needed to grasp the children's routines. The household's silent rules had formed their own grammar over 2 years without her. Owen instructed her about the horses with the gravity of someone sharing expert insights. Without explicitly stating it, Lucy showed her precisely where her mother used to stand in the kitchen and what that signified. Eliza discovered she was adept at learning. Since the age of 14, she had been mastering the art of keeping everything together. What changed now was that she had someone to hold it all together with her. Her initial undertaking was the kitchen garden. The October plantings were turned and arranged, prepared for the winter crops and the upcoming spring growth. One evening, Daniel stepped outside and observed. "My wife planted that apple tree," he remarked. "It was the very first thing she did after we arrived." "I'm aware," Eliza responded. "You've shown it to me before." "The children ought to know about her," he insisted. "Then through you, we ensure she remains Eliza," we said. "We share her stories. We tend the tree." A peace settled within him that had been unsettled for 2 years. In May, Lucy stood under the blossoming apple tree. Gazing upward at the blossoms, her face held the wonder of a child witnessing something she'd only heard of before. "Mama planted that tree," Owen informed her during that first year. "I know," Lucy replied. "Eliza told me about it on the porch that night." All four were present, every chair occupied, while the Colorado mountains continued their timeless presence. Daniel glanced from his children to Eliza, whose hair, as usual, had slipped free from its pins by evening. She sat reading in the chair next to him, completely comfortable. He remained silent, saying only what was necessary. She raised her gaze, caught his eyes, then returned to her reading. The Colorado night enveloped them all, and for the first time in 2 years, that embrace felt sufficient. Eliza Marsh came to Clearfield, Colorado, carrying a leather bag and exactly $4.30. There was no one remaining in the world who was hers. Perched on the hotel stairs, she calculated the sum of a life that had exhausted all its numerals. Then a 9-year-old boy halted before her and inquired about her sadness. "I often reflect on Owen, on what it signifies to be so fearless in asking a straightforward question. As adults, we gradually learn to pass by people on steps. We learn to mind our own business. We master countless subtle methods of staying uninvolved. Owen had not yet acquired any of them." He halted and asked, and his father, who had spent 2 years single-handedly keeping everything intact, pivoted at the street's end and returned. Never ignore the person on the steps. Pose the question and then turn back at the street's end. Additionally, I wish to mention something about Eliza. Standing at the laundry press one Tuesday afternoon, she realized that safe and right aren't always synonymous.